Hi, my name is Kevin Tenney. I'm the writer-director of the film you're about to see, and sitting to my left is...
Jeff Joffre, also known as Gerald Joffre, as credited in this film, and I was the producer. And next to me is...
Walter Jostin. I'm one of the executive producers.
And he was kind of the guy who actually put the whole project together for us, really. It's interesting. I don't think any of us has seen this in probably 10 years. It was the first film for all of us. It was my first professional writing, directing gig. It was Jeff's first producing gig. Definitely Walter's first executive producing, his first time putting together a film in any way, shape, or form. So you'll have to remember and forgive as you watch, because it was the first film for all of us.
It was actually the first script
that you ever read.
Yeah. And it was really fascinating because I could see the movie with every page. And I remember Tawny Katane, one day we were on the set talking, and she said what a great script it was. And because I hadn't really been in the business reading scripts, as I've done over the last 20 years, it really is remarkable that for the first read, that's the script that I got to read. And probably I'd have to say there maybe have only been 10 or 15 scripts of the hundreds and hundreds I've read over 20 years that is that good. That was a movie that you could see it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I've always said I'd rather be lucky than smart or good. and that was it. We were in the right place at the right time. And Jeff and I knew each other from film school. And when Walter and I got together, brought together by another guy I knew from film school, Roland Carroll, who worked for you at the time, right, Walter?
Yeah.
In commodities. And he introduced us. And then once Walter and I decided we wanted to make this film together, we brought Jeff in to produce. And we were off to the races.
Kevin introduced me, as he mentioned, to Walter, and we've been business partners ever since. We've all made other movies together since then, but Walter and I have made and worked on probably over 50 films since this time.
And here we have our opening party scene. And you know what? I'm just remembering as we sit here, this is actually like scene 13 or so in the script.
Right.
We had a whole big, 12 other scenes that opened the movie. We saw the boat explosion with the little boy. We saw Jim and Linda preparing for the party. We saw the spirit point of view floating from the lake where the boy died to the house where they are now. And we said, we don't need any of this. And we just opened with the party. Although I remember when we were showing this to distributors, I felt that the party scene was kind of a very straightforward, dull scene. And I always wanted to stand up to the distributors that were watching it in the theater and say, honest, if you just get through the party scene, it starts to actually pick up, please.
Well, having had almost a year of test marketing with the picture, because we had a number of false starts with distributors who wanted to buy the picture, who actually some who did buy the picture and had financial difficulties paying for the picture before they took delivery. It was interesting to see it with audiences, and in a funny way, I think the slower beginning actually works for the film because it builds on itself, and later on when it really gets going, I think it's a really nice surprise to the audience.
Yeah, and I remember one critic actually commented on the opening because the characters were discussing philosophy and the existence of whether or not God or the universe is infinite, and it set a tone for him right away. He said, "This, I already knew I wasn't watching your average horror film."
Well, after watching it so many times while it was going through the editing process, I could see how you came to the conclusion. And we had this exciting boat blow-up scene, which was probably the most expensive part of the movie, which we ultimately didn't use, which I remember Jeff telling me was a very, very brave thing to do.
Or stupid. Either way.
But, well, it actually worked out because the film, every time we screened it, and I remember the one screening room, in the Magna screening room in Times Square when we were screening it for Cinema Group, the ultimate distributor, and all their board of directors who had come in from all over the world. We had arranged that screening for them. And I just got nervous and thought, there's no way that these 50, 60-year-old executives are going to appreciate this movie without an audience. So we went out and handed flyers to all these kids in Times Square and said, "You're invited to a free screening up at the 4th floor of the Magna Screening Room." And they came up, and from the very first frame of film, nobody was bored. I mean, we knew after the first set of screenings that this was a special movie, and it just continued through its opening weekend. And when we opened New Year's Eve of 1987.
No, I think we opened wide in March of '87,
Yeah,
right?
New Year's Eve of '87 exactly was when we Cinema Group did the test market. I remember going over to Las Vegas and seeing a line around the theater and going, "Man, we are dead," because I thought it was for the Eddie Murphy movie.
Right.
I
I know,
because
they opened us against everything, like Lethal Weapon, Evil Dead 2. I mean, everything that could possibly be out that week was out, and we were like, "Oh my God, this little nothing film that no one's heard of."
Yeah, well, that the Lethal Weapon opening was in April when they opened wide, but for the for the test that they opened in 18 theaters in 9 cities, I think. One of them was Vegas, and I think they were up against Golden Child and, I don't know, a couple of other Christmas pictures. And here's this line around the block, and I'm thinking, oh man, no one's going to come to see Witchboard.
Yeah.
And I get to the box office, and the ticket taker says, "This is Witchboard." And it was like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And we went into a packed theater, saw it New Year's Eve, and that was really a thrilling time.
Oh, I know. I remember going to Westwood and seeing the marquee, you know, and I was just like, 4 months out of film school, and seeing the marquee in the Westwood Theater, and it was just very exciting.
And it always played really well in audiences, especially these first scares with the planchette popping up.
Yeah.
And it always amazes me, too, how many people ask how we did the effects with the planchette on the Ouija board.
It's like the actors are pushing a dummy.
Or there's a magnet under the table.
Yeah, a big expensive effect there. We said, Tawny, push it to yes. Now push it to no.
Or Taslow Bauer with a fish pole and a fishing line.
That's right. That's how we pull it off their knees when it does the big scare effect earlier.
Funny seeing Stephen Nichols in the suit and tie and clothes that he's wearing. A lot of that stuff after the original wardrobe set him up. He was not happy, and so we had to go shopping.
That's right.
To buy all those suits. And I thought, well, if some
he's
of the
supposed to be rich, he's got to be wearing expensive
exactly. Suits. Which included, at the time, I owned a replica of a Cobra.
Oh, right, right.
Which
he drives in the film.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was like, luckily you had money, because we had to borrow from you expensively to make him look rich, because the budget didn't support what he needed to be wearing. But yeah, I mean, ultimately it does. If he was wearing some cheap, knockoff suit there, it would look like it. The fact that he's wearing very expensive clothes helps sell the fact that this is supposed to be a guy from money.
I love all these actors, too. I mean,
I know.
Stephen Nichols and Todd Allen and Tawny, I think, did such a great job. And I also think Becca Boss and you, Kevin, did a great job casting the film.
Well, that's funny. When Tawny came in, we had a lot of really pretty girls come in to read who were talented and could act. And if you remember, there was another actress I actually liked a little better than Tawny. But the one thing I noticed was that with all these beautiful women parading in and out, all the guys in the office only really drooled over Tawny. And I thought, you know what? If these guys have seen 500 gorgeous women come and go, and Tawny stands out for them, then she's got something, and that's what we want this character to have.
Yeah, it was. It's funny. He's wearing one of my rings. He's wearing a bracelet. Oh, that's funny. I found all that stuff about 2 or 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah, sitting in a drawer somewhere in the house.
It's amazing that I think I have one of those boards somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
I always run into people who have them. It's like, how'd you get one? And I didn't get one, But I think Dennis, my brother, who did the music for this, has one. I know I have one from Witchboard 2 that actually has the hand coming out of it from the Dream Effect. But I think that's the only one I actually... And then I think I have a promotional Witchboard that Cinema Group gave out when they were promoting the film.
Yeah.
But I don't know that I actually have one from the film.
Yeah, we had a number of lucky little breaks. You mentioned Tawny and the fact that she was doing those Whitesnake videos and was kind of really.
Well, she wasn't actually doing them at the time. She
No.
did them right after we finished using her. So she
Exactly.
became very hot just before we released a film with her in it.
That was a lucky
That
break.
was a very lucky break. Steve had just started on Days of Our Lives as the character Patch, who was only a recurring character at the time. But he was so popular, he was a bad guy. They slowly turned him into a good guy, and he became like the most popular character on the soap. And both of them hit just as we were getting ready to release the film. So we were in very good shape with the two actors who had started out being fairly unknown.
And of course, Kathleen Wilhoit, very unknown at that time.
Oh yeah,
Now
and
she's
she
done so
just,
much.
and she's like just a phenomenal actress and a joy to work with.
She has an album out now. Have you heard
She's
it?
an incredible singer.
Yeah, she's a really good singer.
I mean, she's a songwriter, singer, and she's great at both of them. Great voice, incredible voice.
And I know Jim Quinn was one of your best friends, and that was a bit of a question. Should he play that role, and what was he going to be like? And then he just embraced that role, and
Oh man,
I think
yeah.
became the spirit of the cast in so many ways.
Oh, absolutely. He made that character so much funnier than he was written. I mean, 90%. A lot of the other humor, like Todd, who plays Jim, I wrote. I mean, all of his smart ass lines, I pretty much wrote them, and he did a great job delivering them. But I had written them. The character played by Jim, his friend Lloyd, pretty much just said Lloyd sees that the car has a flat, and then Jim just went on a riff with it. And so most of the humor that comes from that character totally comes out of Jim Quinn's own demented mind.
And I think it's what really makes the scene work, even though, as you said, it's a tough scene to begin with. The humor always worked with people in the when we would show it initially.
And these scares, I remember one of the distributors who first saw it just kept going, well, you're using all these cheap scares. I said, yeah, but watch everybody in the audience go for them.
Go for them, yeah.
In fact, when we first, I think, locked picture, we would, at the time, my office was backed up to a conference room and there was a glass window between. And so I used to love to watch the investors watch the film.
And watch them jump.
And at the right moment, I would just knock on the window right when the jump would be set up. And I mean, it would put people right out of their seats. It was great.
Yes, you're a sick, demented man, Walter Justin.
This car is, that's a funny story. The Transpo guys, I think we use this the car in 2 or 3 films.
Mm-hmm.
And on every single film, while the Transpo guys were sound testing the car, they would throw a rod or blow an engine, and we had no insurance for that.
Right.
So every time I let them use the car,
You live to regret it.
yeah, I had to replace an engine.
I know the transportation guy on the film, Vic Anderson, as much as he was responsible for that, he was always, whenever we would ask him to come and work for us, he'd ask, well, are we going to have to use the Cobra again? Because he would always have a hard time keeping his guys in line with it, and we'd have to drag it all over the place. And
yeah, it was.
Vic
Wasn't it towed up to?
Vic was a great guy.
Oh, he was. Yeah,
he was great.
I didn't even know what a transportation captain did. I don't know if you remember it, but in the original budget, we did not have a separate transportation captain. And
you know what, guys? When you think about the film, that this thing was made for like around $1 million and grossed 8 to 10 in theatrical and did a ton of business, ancillary markets, and the three of us were so clueless. We had no, I mean, we basically knew how to make a film from film school, but we really didn't know all the really little finite details. And the fact that we managed to pull this off is just a true, true sign of dumb luck.
Yeah,
pure dumb luck.
That is so true. I mean, and I think we were really blessed, again, lucky to get people like Robin Oliver and Roy
first
Wagner,
AD, Roy Wagner, the DP, who had experience and knew how to move quick and work on a small budget and still deliver excellent work. Because we would have been floundering like tadpoles in a mud puddle otherwise, man.
Yeah, and I think at least with me, Kevin, because I was making so many mistakes, they really never.
First one being, yes, I'll work on the
Yeah.
film with you, Kevin.
They were always respectful of how foolish I was, but very good about really telling me what I should be doing. Things we had never learned in film school in
Yeah.
terms of having that big of a crew, and then of course Walter being there to back us and support us throughout the whole process,
There's one
even
of those
though
cheap
we were.
scares.
Yeah, that cheap scare always got people.
What do you think, Kevin? Why do in some films people jump at scares and then other times they don't? Do you have?
My theory, and this is just my theory, is that if you create characters that they believe in and they like and they care about, and you've got a story that rings true for them, even no matter how supernatural or far out you get, that, if it's a character they don't care about and he's being stalked or hunted, they don't care.
That's another great one.
Another big scare. Todd had to act backwards because we put the axe in the wood and pulled it out with a wire, and he had to go backwards. So
yeah, if you look at those few seconds, and I remember we shot this at this location 2 different days, and so we brought the movieola to the location on the
right.
second day to see what it looked like going backwards, and all of us were so excited about how good it worked.
Yeah, it was like, wow, it looks great. We just had him start out looking scared and then pulled the axe out of the wall, and he had to go from looking scared to looking like he was just standing around waiting. And then when we play it in reverse, the axe comes flying across, hits the board, and he looks like he's jumping with fear.
I used to love sitting in the screening rooms with the distributors or the recruited audience and just wait for those moments to happen. And they just worked every single time. But, your point about dumb luck, the fact we're all still here today making films, I think the reason we are doing such a thing is because of certain choices. And the fact that we chose to work on this project, as I say, it was the first script that I had read. But before we decided to do this film,
You
probably read
others.
another 10 more.
Right.
And none of them, in my opinion, were as commercial, were as much of a page turner. None of them did I care about the characters. This is interesting how, and I don't know who was responsible for this, but the way the Ouija board changes throughout the film and gets more and more and more demonic, I thought was really a great...
Yeah, that was my idea. But, it's funny, unless you actually point it out to people, no one ever, which I guess was the point. We just wanted them to kind of feel that but we actually have 3 versions of the board. And like you'll see here, the little cherub at the top, he's got like angel-like wings, and the moon and the sun, there's kind of smiley faces, and the 2 angels at the bottom have angel wings. And by the end of the film, the board, they have bat-like wings. So it's very subtle. No one notices it's a different board. It's not supposed to be a different board, but you're just supposed to feel when you look at it that suddenly it's getting more evil and creepier. And so hopefully it is working on a subliminal level. Since no one notices the board's changing, we don't know if it ever worked or not. But it was just something we tried to do to add a layer to the story and to the characterization, and to also portray the board as one of the characters, since it really is, in a way, the 4th character in the film after our 3 leads.
I remember one of our earlier conversations making that point. You said, I want the board to be one of the characters in the film, and I had no idea if you were going to be able to pull it off, and it works beautifully.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's funny, a guy my wife works with went out to dinner with some girl the other night, and just over dinner conversation they were talking, and what are your 5 favorite films? She says Witchboard, and it's one of her 5 favorite.
I remember, though, talking about putting the Witchboard, all these inserts in and making it a character. Those weren't in that first cut that we did, that I think was like 180 minutes long.
Yeah.
That we showed to all of the investors, including Walter.
The most depressing day of my life up to that point.
I know. I kept telling everybody, I said, guys, this is a rough cut. I'm going to lose stuff. Everything's in the film, but now we know what we don't need. But
I remember too that, Walter really loved the script. That's why, he was making it. And so he sees this 180-minute cut without all the inserts of the Witchboard, none of the effects.
Because we hadn't shot those yet.
And he hasn't been to film school so he hasn't seen,
he's never seen
cuts.
A film in progress. Yeah.
Not to mention sitting through it with all the investors,
people who gave him money.
And I remember after the film, we went back to the office, and Ron Mitchell, who was our supervising producer and kind of our mentor through the process,
That's right,
came back and told me, Jeff, they're coming over to fire you, but I think it'll be okay. And that was, what everybody came back, and Walter, as usual, kept his totally cool head, and we just talked about what we were going to do, and everything made some sense to him, and so we just stayed the course, and it was in those subsequent meetings that we made these tough decisions, like cutting out the boat explosion and minimizing the David role and so forth.
Right, and there was a whole backstory with Jim's other girlfriend who committed suicide.
Oh yeah,
and
you're right.
And she was the actress. I can't remember her name who played the part. Was beautiful, and she did a great job. And we just totally cut her out because it was just just more stuff we didn't really need to keep. We wanted to keep the story focused and centered on these characters and this Ouija board.
Thinking about it too, I think cutting that out really brought up Jim Quinn's role,
right?
Because it really made him the other character, along
right.
with again Kathleen Wilhoit,
right? Who shows up later as Zarabeth and is just phenomenal.
What are we 21 minutes into the film and Jim dies?
Our first death.
You really did a great job setting him up, having us care about him, like him, and so when he does go, it's not just a meaningless.
It's not just the first fodder.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's somebody you actually liked. I know we had people actually when he got killed in the theater kind of go, because this was a guy they were really into, and we just dropped a ton of sheetrock on him and watched him go splat.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you think about it. Tawny's always thought of more as being this look, this pretty face, this great figure, but she really did a nice job for us here. Her, and Stephen Nichols, they have a lot of scenes where they're basically playing to a board.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how hard is that? You're sitting there having a conversation with a piece of masonite, and especially her, because she's actually got to convey that she's getting emotionally involved with this little boy's character, and that she's actually starting to feel maternal toward him. And she does a very nice job of pulling all that off.
Yeah, as much as people know her for personality and her celebrity, she really, when you look at this and Bachelor Party, she has an amazing way of pulling off, a natural kind of young woman, but she's a total babe at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And that's true. You talk about Bachelor Party, where that part was basically straight woman, and yet she managed to still be very funny in it. And here she runs the gamut. She's cute, she's funny, she's scary later when she's possessed, and all through here you actually buy all the emotions she's going through.
I love the false scares throughout as well. It's
I do
really
too.
had the audience on the not knowing.
I'm a big fan of giving them a scare and then doing something funny, and then while they're feeling all safe because they've been laughing, scaring them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can have false scares that are frivolous, but a lot of these false scares, like looking into the pipe, are actually advancing the story too.
Right.
So
well,
you're following that story. Is she going to dig out the ring? What's going to be there?
Exactly.
And,
or is something going to come out of that pipe?
Yeah.
Right. But we're not just having her at the pipe to see the scare. She went to the pipe, and we do have a point for her to be there, is that she finds the ring. And you're right. The scare of where we think something's going to come out is organic to the scene, in that she was going to go to that pipe to get that ring, regardless of whether there was a scary moment or not. I can't remember, but I don't think we had any scary moments that were there just for the scare. The scare was added to a scene that would have been there whether it had the scare or not.
Well, I remember seeing that drain scene over and over, and after about the 10th time, I realized there was no way that toothbrush at the angle she was putting it in could have pulled that ring
Absolutely not. Well, it's like there's no way from the angle the car was earlier at the party scene with the flat tire that Jim's character could have looked out the window and seen the flat. It was on the opposite side of the house. I suppose he could have noticed the car was leaning funny, but but yeah, you always you do what looks good for camera and hope that you're moving so fast the audience doesn't catch some of those things.
Well, I always remember your ham sandwich.
Hitchcock's ham sandwich theory, that if they watch the movie, say it's great, and then they go home and go to bed, get up in the middle of the night, start making themselves a ham sandwich snack, and then go, wait a minute, that couldn't have, it doesn't matter, too late, they've left the movie, it doesn't count. Anything they figure out after they're gone doesn't count.
Unless they're a critic and they write it in their column.
Well, you remember, we got a lot of good reviews, but we got some bad ones too. But the one I will never forget is some guy on the Orange County Register who wrote the review, who stated at the start of the review, I haven't seen this film. and then proceeded to tear it apart, saying it must be bad because it was a horror film. Although admitting he hadn't seen it. And then at the time, we had all these great reviews on the ad where we did get good reviews from the LA Times and New York Post. And he proceeded to quote those and say, well, these guys must be idiots to say nice things about this movie. And all the time he's admitting he never saw the film.
He even went so far in that article to talk about somebody going to put up a Hollywood sign up in the Irvine Hills, which is where we live.
Uh-huh.
And I was just so aggravated by that. It was literally, I think, one of the first reviews I had ever seen in my life on anything that we'd ever done.
Yeah.
And I called him up.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I'm sure he was glad to hear from you. But it probably said, I appreciate the feedback.
Well, what I learned at that time is that, reporters, are like a lot of people in the entertainment business. They want to entertain and they want to further their career. And so it's safer to be a dissenter. And
well, I got to admit, of all the reviews, it was nice to read the good ones, but the bad ones were the ones that were funny because they would say funny things while they were insulting the movie. And a couple of times I laughed out loud while they were insulting me or my movie. But this guy was like, come on, dude, at least watch the film before you decide to hate it. That's another shot that people ask, how'd you do that shot? Because you're up there and it's like, it was just a Steadicam, but we put it on the top of the Steadicam, the camera on the top. Usually people put it on the bottom of the Steadicam, so the camera's about waist level. We just put it on the top, so it was up near the roof. Yeah. I had people say, well, I didn't see the speed rail on the roof that the camera must have been hanging from. How'd you do that? Just a Steadicam,
That's another case. We had what turned out to be one of the best Steadicam operators in the business working on this film. Yeah. And I think he did it because of the challenges
of the spirit
that
point
were presented.
Of view shots.
Yeah, exactly.
Because these were written in the script as these very elaborate POV shots, and I'm sure he looked at that and said, wow, that'd look good on my reel.
It certainly wasn't because of the money we're paying.
No, that's for sure. Nobody got rich off of this movie. But it was a great experience. I mean, I certainly, I've always said I did a lot of other jobs before I went back to film school, one of which was a construction worker. And I've always said my very worst day on the set is still better than my best day on the site. It's like I'd rather be making movies in bad weather with a crew I hate than working with people I like on a construction site.
This scene was always a bit problematic for us from the point that we saw the 100 and whatever it was minute director's first cut.
Right.
One of the people there must have been part of the fashion police, very, very upset with how Tawny was dressed in this scene, and just gave me this earful the next Monday morning about how nobody in her position, college student, would dress like this for a funeral. And it was, I had to do some heavy explaining. This character, I think, also like the Kathleen Wilhoit character who comes in later, Zarabeth, Burke Burns does a great job with this character. And
he's great.
He's so great.
He's so at ease. He doesn't, because this character, someone could come in and say, wow, he's got a lot of funny stuff and really hammer it. And he doesn't. He does it so like he's just a guy talking. And that's what makes it. He just sells the joke so well because he doesn't push to sell him. He just lets them happen. And he's so nonchalant. He's so natural. And again, a joy to work with. And I know this is going to get boring to everyone to hear, but the cast really was a great joy to work with. They were all just terrific, easy to work with, lots of fun.
Well, I think he too on this. These are your lines, and yet they come off so naturally. Mm-hmm. And I think he's such a pro, just getting the most out of everything that you have on the page there.
Oh yeah. And I mean, and a lot of it is just not even, he's got the lines, but then some of his reactions are just so priceless. And that's not stuff I can write for him. He's either knows how to do it or he doesn't, and it's like while he's being a buffoon, you still kind of get that feel that this guy knows what he's doing too. I don't think so. And that's all Burke.
We were in Vegas recently and I was looking at the marquee of Siegfried and Roy, and I was thinking of this scene.
Sigmund, how he mispronounced it. He says Sigmund and Roy, yeah, because I wanted him to kind of like not really up on what he's talking about.
I kept thinking of the line that he uses at the end of the scene, nothing up my sleeve.
Nothing up my sleeve. But he does, even that he does. Oh, that's actually Todd that does that. He goes, but he does it so. Todd's another example of someone who really underplays and just comes across as very natural. You don't feel like you're watching him act at all. He looks like someone who's annoyed and getting his hackles up, but trying to still maintain the nonchalance while he's dealing with his detective.
He kind of set a standard for me as to how a lead actor acts in a movie too, in terms of not just in front of the camera, but he was such a supporter behind the camera, making things happen. You know, I mean, he would have been willing to move cable. And I know that, like, on successive films, I sort of yearn for that in some cases, where the leading guy, you just wanted to come in and help you.
Well, you talk about that. That just reminds me of, remember him and Roy Wagner ended up having this like great rivalry where they would like make fun of each other. But
he was teasing Todd with his ears.
Yeah, he would look at Todd's close-ups and he'd go, "Oh my God, look at those ears." During dailies, he'd go, "Where the hell did he get those ears?" And then Todd would go like, "I thought we were getting a real DP. What's going on here?"
Well, the worst was when we were up in Big Bear and we had to screen the dailies at a local cinema, and they didn't have a double system. So we had to listen to it silent. But the whole time,
they're just doing commentary. Todd's talking about how bad the lighting is, and Roy's talking about how big Todd's ears are.
I thought seeing the dailies was always just a great time.
Yeah.
Everybody was so willing to take criticism, but also dish it out.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. No, it was fun. This was a fun experience because I think the fact that, knowing what I know now about how movies get made, I don't think I would have tried to do this knowing what I know now. I mean, the only reason we pulled this off is because none of us was experienced to know that it couldn't be done. We didn't know that you couldn't do what we were doing, so we just went ahead and did it. But I remember when we started showing it to distributors, none of them could believe that when they saw it, they liked it. And they said, "This is a really good little film. How come we haven't heard anything about it?" Because we didn't know how to promote ourselves. We didn't put any bits in Variety or that we were making this movie. We just went out and made it, and it was a done film. And no one could believe that we'd gone off and made this movie, and no one had heard a thing about it until it was a done film.
That's one thing, Walt, you mentioned about the hat and how you had to explain it to the investors. But I remember, because we did have investors who were looking at what we were doing, I think it made us much more circumspect about what we were doing, making sure everything counted. And at the same time, we had our own little internal screenings that we did that kind of allowed us to see, well, what was it playing like for different people? Or I know you did, and were able to feed back that information to us all the time.
Well, I know that we had cut some of the lines in the cemetery because it was just a long scene. But before we cut it, we had it on tape, and you showed it to some investors, and they all laughed at all the lines. And we said, "Okay, we'll put them back," because we had cut it for time, and then thought, you know what, this character's really playing well. Because we'd cut the thing about the bomb squad where he knocks in his head and says, "No one's planted a bomb here yet, knock wood," and that just got such a great reaction. We said, let's put it back in. I remember Lee Haxel, our sound designer, who actually was also our production recorder here, had a hell of a time with this scene because Tawny was quiet, and then she'd go, "Ah," and it would blow her levels. So then she'd reset her levels and say, "Can we do another take? Can we do another take?" And Tawny would go even louder. Each time Tawny got more adrenaline, she'd go louder and louder, and Lee kept trying to bring the sound up, to the levels up, down to keep from just totally feeding back and going off the meter. But it took like 4 times before they finally got it. I think we might have still ended up ADRing the scream. I'm not sure.
I think we might have.
Yeah.
It occurs to me, I don't know that there's another example, at least that I know of, where the sound mixer, production sound mixer, also does the sound design. I thought Lee did a great job.
A great job.
And I think she made sure that her production sound was good when we got into the ADR.
Well, yeah. No, she was great. She's a picture cutter now. She's working on The Shield, I believe.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, but Lee was a joy to work with and just a sweetie pie. And again, someone we knew from film school. And yeah, she did do a great job. And, and I hate ADRing lines if you don't have to. So I'm willing to try another take for sound if they're not happy, because I'd rather have it right. I'd rather have production sound be right and not have to ADR. But I'll say this, like several of the lines in here are ADR, and I can tell ADR when I hear it in other films, and even some of my other films, my own films. But in this one, Lee and the mixer, who I can't remember the guy's name, but they just did a phenomenal job because the ADR here is flawless.
I think we also got to give kudos to your brother Dennis for doing a great job with the music. And
Yeah,
you know,
and again, his first time doing a score.
Well, you mentioned the three of us, our first project, but how many people besides us? This was their first film. Dan Duncan, the editor.
Duncan, the editor, his first professional editing a feature film, who's now become like, you know, the go-to guy for almost every production company in town. They go to him to cut their films, or if their film isn't working, they go to him to recut it and make it work, you know.
This scene here, we used one of the stills to create our very first poster.
Oh, that's
which
right.
was the thing that we promoted it with to the distributors.
With her standing there in that nightgown.
And the title that's used on this cut here is the actual Witchboard title that the artist who created the poster,
the original poster.
Mm-hmm, she used that, and
which you did the painting for. It was like a
right. It was like an old fashioned painted one sheet like they used to do in the 30s.
Yeah, and we use this shot as well.
This scene
always gets a
humongous jump. This is probably the biggest jump in the film. That and the one where Todd grabs.
Let's not give it away.
Well, hopefully anyone who's listening to this has already seen the film. If you're watching this with the commentary before you've seen the film without, stop, go back to the start, and watch the film without this, because you're ruining it, bozo.
Yeah, that was a great scare and really a beautifully shot scene.
Well, that was a lucky break production-wise, because I don't know if you remember, Kevin, but we ran over schedule in the house. So we did a big no-no, pulling up stakes, going to Big Bear. But I remember when we moved that scene, I could actually justify, well, the rooms... We don't need to bring back all the furniture because we'll just put that.
Dream.
Yeah, exactly. It's
put
a dream.
The coffin in the middle of the floor.
Yeah,
and luckily too, I think we didn't have in the budget coffins. We started pricing them, and they were like phenomenal.
Ridiculous.
But the prop guy, Bob Lucas, had one. That's his coffin. He had it. He used to fill it with ice and put beer in it at barbecues. And anyway, he let us use his coffin. He was a phenomenal find. He was someone that was suggested by the art director, Sarah Burdick, who at the time was Jim Quinn's girlfriend.
Oh, yes.
And he turned out to be just like a big plus. He did so much on this film besides just props, that
one of Jim's girlfriends, right?
Yeah, one of his many women, Jim the Lothario.
The shot right before Tony's scream with the Venetian blinds is such a nice one that one of the German and Scandinavian distributors used it for their poster.
So did the British.
Yeah. And it's one of the posters that we have up in the office.
Now. Yeah.
And that high shot, I think, was the first shot of the movie.
Yeah, that was originally from scene 11, which didn't end up in the film, which was the spirit point of view from way up in the sky looking down on the house. We sent the camera operator up there and a big cherry picker.
That house, that house was actually in the Highland.
Yeah, we had to shoot it at angles so that you couldn't see. Like right next door was a big street. It was like
it's on just off of Wilshire.
Yeah, so you had Wilshire with all the LA traffic, and this is supposed to be Fairfield in Northern California in a small town. So we had to be very creative about how we showed the house from what angles.
Hancock Park is where.
Yeah, Hancock Park. I remember driving up the first morning of photography and seeing this huge crane and all this production value, and I was really impressed.
Me too. I was like, well, this ain't like my 480, my student film.
But then that changed about 24 hours later when Jeff said, well, we fired the DP and
that's right.
We're 2 days behind schedule on our first day.
No, but the biggest drama on that first day was that I had made this what I thought was a very hip decision to not have donuts on the craft service table, because there was a great croissant place just up the block. And I thought, let's have croissant and, nice orange juices and so forth instead of, the usual junk on the craft service table.
And the Grips and Gaffers almost kicked your ass.
The Grips and Gaffers said, if you don't get donuts on that table within 15 minutes, we're walking. And they were serious. So that was the last time I tried to screw with people's culinary habits on a movie.
And
sometimes cliches are cliches for a reason.
Didn't I ask one of the prop guys to do the donuts?
Oh yeah, Louis Abernathy,
Oh,
who's
he was special effects with Taslow,
yeah, Louis Abernathy, who went
who
on
went
to
on to write Deep Star 6.
yeah, and he's one of Jim Cameron's good friends, and
Yeah,
starred in the Titanic. He's in those opening scenes.
that's right.
He's in Ghost of the Abyss as well.
Good old Lou. What a character, too.
Yeah.
Again, a great guy to work with. Lots of fun, really professional on the set, but fun and a great attitude.
Yeah.
And he and Tawny like hit it off. He was like always, he brought he brought that humongous like European poster from Perils of Gwendolyn that was like as big as
Oh God, yeah.
as big as a cube van for her to autograph for him. And what a character.
Funny.
I remember a few times being crumpled up into the corner, basically about to break down, and him just giving me a big bear hug and said, it'll be all right.
It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for all of us, a first-time adventure like this, everything meant everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I know it was life and death. Every little thing was life and death. You know what? These guys are so good in this scene together, and it's because their styles are so drastic. Steve is very, very intense, and Todd's very laid back. And so the acting styles complement each other, but it's great because for the characters, Todd's character of Jim is supposed to be a very laid back, almost slacker type. And Steve's character, Brandon, is supposed to be this very intense, serious guy. And so the fact that that's their acting, the way they approach their parts, just played so well. And these guys ended up developing a real rapport together, really friends. I still keep in touch with both of them. Our daughters, Steve has a daughter the same age as mine. And they've had sleepovers and play together.
That's great.
And it's just, it's just amazing because you form intense friendships and then the film's over. And a lot of times you just lose touch with these people. And it's nice when you can actually keep in touch with certain people.
I think Roy's style of lighting and camera work too help here, because I know that even though there's some mismatching in lighting, and when you compare it to what's going outside, that his speed really helped.
Oh, absolutely.
And also he got out of the actor's way, created an environment that they could just really get into the scene.
Exactly.
And he didn't, futz with them. And I know they appreciated it and made some of these scenes work.
Well, you think about it. Walter had mentioned earlier, the first DP was also a first-timer we knew from film school. And about after the first week, we knew we were in trouble. He wasn't able to light fast, and his lighting wasn't really working. It was too overlit. And Roy had been the camera operator on that. And I really thought that the problems we were having with the set not moving fast enough were my fault. And I remember standing there, and I turned to Roy and I said, "Oh man, I'm so sorry, guys. Maybe I shouldn't have taken on a feature film right out of film school."
I'm glad I wasn't there to hear that.
Yeah, but the nice thing was Roy said to me, he goes, "Look, I've done like 80 films. I got to tell you, you're a terrific director and one of the best I've worked with. And the problems on this set aren't you."
It's incredible how supportive he was,
Yeah.
as I said. And I think to Richard's credit, the crew that he hired, because it was more his responsibility to hire Roy and find the grips and the gaffers.
Right.
I think he did a terrific job. Even I think the Steadicam operator
Was
came
someone
from his
Yeah.
studying, who was out there and who was really hot.
Right.
And I think we had given him a 4-week prep, and I think he spent a lot of that time really hiring a good crew. And I think it almost undermined him because he had these great horses underneath him,
Yeah.
who were just ready to burst out and really shoot the kinds of things you really wanted to do.
Right.
And he had to step aside.
Yeah. And here she is, Kathleen Wilhoit, who, that's so funny. We had like 40 girls come in one day to read this part. She was the first one. She read, she left. I turned to Beck and I said, "Well, I guess we have to see everyone because they're here, but there's no doubt in my mind she's the girl." And sure enough, no one else came in to change my mind for the rest of the day. She was just brilliant. Just brilliant. And again, just a sweetheart to work with, like Todd and Burke and Steven and Connie and Jim Quinn. The whole gang were just...
Script-wise, too, she comes in at just the right time,
Yeah.
too. And I think, Kevin, originally you had written that role to be a little more like
just
the
your
woman,
traditional
yeah, just the
gypsy
tradition, yeah.
type, yeah. And actually, it was Sarah Burdick, the art director, who just when she read the script said, "Hey, this is a really good script." And we were talking, and she said, "But you know what? Why does the she's just another gypsy like we see in all of them?" And I thought, you know what, she is.
And she has a little flavor though of Sarah in
Yeah.
some ways. You know,
And I
kind of
said,
the
what can I
spunky,
do with her?
yeah,
And
hip,
I think I
yeah,
probably based her a little on Sarah. I
yeah.
said, okay, well, because Sarah used to run around in the really short shorts and the combat boots, and I think I thought, you know what, and give her kind of just an irreverence.
And I think Sarah had a few piercings that most people didn't have back
Yeah,
then.
well, if it wasn't Sarah, maybe Sarah had a few, but her whole art department was
Yeah.
kind of the art department's always like the most wild crew set members on this set.
My wife still quotes that, whatever happens, stay in your seats. I think, as you pointed out, people come up to you and tell you it's one of their favorite films. It still happens to us from time to time. It's
I still
amazing.
have people come up and say TTFN to me.
Exactly. And what I was going to say is most people wind up quoting the lines from Zarabeth.
Yeah. I hear that one, or the one that Jim said in the earlier scene where he says, "So what you're telling me is I'm living with Linda Blair." I hear those all the time. But yeah, she just did a great job. She was a nice comic relief, and just a nice, you know, for a character who's not going to be around that long. She came in, she made her mark, and she died magnificently as well. But again, here's a perfect example. This scene is so nicely lit. Roy did this, and I'm, you know, and this crew could have said, you know, when I told them I want to do this 360 twice around the table, it's a 3.5 minute scene that we're going to do in one take with the camera just going around. And the room was so small, the circle track would have been too big. So they had to do it on a dance floor. We had to lay down just plywood, and that means the focus puller couldn't have exact marks, because if he's on a track, he knows that at this point on the track, I'm exactly 13 feet 5 inches from her nose. So I just have to set the focus at 13.5. But here, because they were on a track, as they went around, they would sometimes go in a little closer, sometimes come out a little wider. So he had to like kind of adjust. Luckily, he always had a couple of people in frame so he could decide who to go to and pick the one that was maybe going to be a little easier for him, but still. And I know that because the fact that as the dolly goes around, it goes in front of a light, we had to have guys there ready to hold something up to shield our shadow as we went past, and then lower it back down so the light was back on the character we needed to be on when we got there. And it was very elaborate. And I just remembered this, we're in the middle of a humongous laughing jag.
Oh, really?
All of us. These guys kept, every time she'd look at him and go, because of Jim, they would lose it. And it'd be like, guys, we're burning film, because it's like near the end of the take. It's like, we've already burned 2 minutes. And I said, that's it. And everyone was laughing in rehearsal. I said, that's it. Stop it. We gotta get this. And we start doing it, and we're going, and we're 2 minutes in. And I suddenly realized I'm going to laugh. I'm thinking, I just yelled at everybody. And I'm going to laugh. And I'm standing there, and I know I've got maybe 2 more seconds before I lose it. And just before I do, Todd loses it. And it was like, and Todd, son of a bitch, Todd, you did it. You screwed up the shot. And it was like, and all I could think inside was, thank God Todd broke, because it would have been me otherwise.
Well, those were during your Mountain Dew days.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Cases and cases of Mountain Dews.
Yes, I had that in all my contracts.
I should have been arrested for...
as a pusher.
Yeah, oh my God.
I would go through, everyone would say, oh, caffeine. It's like, you know, you can't do all that caffeine. You won't sleep at night. I say, oh, I'll sleep fine. Yeah, I used to do at least a case of Mountain Dew per day when we were shooting.
Yeah, so while you guys were up here laughing, I was down in the basement sweating bullets because we'd gone through 9 hours and we hadn't put down, recorded any scenes that day.
But more importantly, we were almost out of dew.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's the empty cans to prove it.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. That's what they did. They just saved all my cans and put them up there for the shot. Well, we actually, because we were featuring the cans in this shot, we got promoted by Pepsi. So we got all the Pepsi and the Mountain Dew for free, which is good, because the way I drank Mountain Dew back then, we would have broke the budget just on that.
I remember that was the first experience I had with product placement.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the first experience we had with a lot of stuff.
Can you imagine that in those days you could get product placement of beer? You know, and so on all these sets where you're shooting 12 or 14 hours a day, 16, 18 hours,
yep,
people regularly finished work and drank beer.
Well, you
know?
remember that actually used to be what they had rap beer.
Rap beer.
You
yeah.
had to have beer on the set so that when the grips were rapping out, they were drinking beer. And I remember the first day I saw that on the set and they were going, oh, where's our rap beer? I'm watching, I think, now this doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You're going to let these guys drink beer while they're loading heavy equipment? That's just like an accident. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. But I guess that used to be a major tradition. They've stopped it since. But I remember thinking even at the time, this doesn't seem like a real smart tradition to me.
Yeah, let me tell you, in Europe, when you shoot, and I know you probably know this, Kevin, it's not rap beer. It's like beer for lunch, ale, wine. Yeah.
It's craft services beer.
I shot a film in Lithuania. The vodka they drink, I just like, they said, here, Kevin, have a shot. I brought it to my face and all my nose hairs exploded just from the smell. I was like, I'm not pouring that down my throat, man. These guys are like, amazing.
We're now about 50 minutes into the film, and I'm looking at the box that's it's supposed to house the Ouija board, and remembering what horror Jeff and I had to go through over that.
Because you were afraid that you're going to be...
Well, we had gotten the E&O clearance on the picture, and we started showing some of the footage to our lawyer, who casually said, do you guys have the clearance to use that board? And we said, yeah. He said, well, let me check this out. And came back, and there was a question. So he casually said, well, you're going to have to use a different board.
We'd already shot
We
like
said,
3
well,
weeks.
we've shot half the film.
Yeah.
Well, I think he also said we had to stop saying Ouija.
Exactly.
It's like, well, you know what? Start preparing the papers for the lawsuit, because there ain't no way we can do it.
That's what we said. So Jeff and I became experts overnight in what to say to the E&O carrier. I think it was Fireman's Fund at the time.
Fireman's Fund, Fred Leopold being kind of the overseer for them. And we had to prove, and Kevin had done a lot of research already, so we had to really prove and justify to him that this was
proliferation of use.
Yeah, exactly.
Public domain, because it was like, Kleenex had become a generic term for tissue. Ouija, what else would you call it?
So again, I think Walter, we decided to keep moving forward, and that we had enough reasons, especially since we were using different boards, including the blue board that's later on.
That came in later.
Yeah.
That's
out of these conversations,
Yeah.
we made a concession that we would change the board later on in the film.
Well, we were going to have a second board anyway. We said, let's make sure the second board is drastically
totally different.
Yeah.
And that's where we came up with the green board.
Which I think worked well. But I remember people asked me, do you believe in Ouija boards, witch boards? And the only time I ever used it, I remember, was after we sent our first round of paperwork to Fred Leopold, and I locked myself in the my production office, and I asked the Ouija board, were we going to be okay?
Are we getting sued, and if so, for how much?
And then I knew I was insane.
Now, here's the song Dennis wrote for the film, and then it was performed by a group that was very popular at the time called Steel Breeze, that we used here and then again at the end titles. And I always like the song because the lyrics are very, they really emote the feeling of the film without saying, oh, we have a Ouija board, do-do-do-do-do. It's about how your imagination in a dark room can make everything seem scary, and I just thought it was a nice mood. This was nice, and again, we used Steadicam, but on this shot, the stairway was so narrow, the Steadicam wouldn't fit. So Roy Wagner ended up having to just do it handheld, running up the camera, hand holding it. And to keep it that smooth when it's handheld, a lot of people don't really appreciate, but that was some really nice work, because running upstairs with a handheld camera can be very jerky, and he managed to hold it very smoothly. Again,
this was a very scary scene.
Yeah, and again, it's 90%. It's just her looking scared and making you scared because she's so scared,
and the anticipation of what's going to happen. And
she could be so funny and then turn around here and just be horrified. And again, I think because we've created a character here that you like, when she dies, it has a lot more impact.
Impact right at the right beat.
A penetrating impact.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Every
Time's
character that dies in this film, you've set them up to either be liked or disliked,
but it's somebody that
yeah.
actually you don't just feel like, oh, cool, someone else died.
Right.
You know, it's characters that you do care about and do feel about one way or the other. I also like the fact that we set him up to be pretty much a jerk at the start of the film, and by the end of the film, he's a really likable character as you get to know him and you understand why he's being a jerk and the emotions that he's dealing with. That was my little voiceover there. We'll be right back with the weather after this.
I remember that was your Hitchcock.
That was my Hitchcock. Yeah, my voice, my voice cameo. And this was for all the girls. We had Todd take his shirt off. We have Tawny in the shower later, and Todd for the girls right here. I actually remember when we were mixing this, and you know, we're doing the old fashioned back then. On the all the sound was on a striped film, on mag film. So you have all the mag running, and then you'd stop for something, and we stopped like right there. And Lee, our sound designer, and Dana DeSell, our sound effects editor, both women, were like, "Nice chest, Todd." While he's standing there in freeze frame.
I think this was one of the first scenes you shot and one of the first set of dailies I saw, and I just was really, really impressed with how great this house looked. And
yeah. And this was actually shot by our first guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I told him, I said, whenever we have windows in a room, I want to shoot toward them because it looks better than shooting toward a blank wall.
Right.
And it makes it, you know, then we're not on a set because you can actually see the outside world. And it just, and this house really was just a great find.
Beautiful house.
How many houses did we look at, Jeff?
Oh, we must have gone to at least 40. It was actually an interesting part of the process because looking for a Victorian house in Los Angeles or around Los Angeles was a great adventure. You know, we went to Monrovia, Altadena,
right,
all around LA.
It got to the point where he said, "Hey, we got more houses to look at." I would just cringe.
Yeah.
Like, oh no. And the problem too was because we had the spirit point of view shots that we're going to travel through 3 or 4 rooms. We not only had to find a house that did what we want, but a lot of times, you know, you cheat rooms. They aren't really connected, but you have a character walk out of one door, cut, you go to the other room that you want to use, and he steps in and you make it look like those rooms are connected. And in this, because the spirit point of view actually went as one shot through the rooms, we actually had to have them connected, and that made it very tough. We'd find a lot of houses that were perfect for 90% of what we wanted, but the rooms didn't really connect, and we couldn't have done the spirit POV shot. So that was what really made it tough when we were looking for a house.
And we really, really wanted that. I mean, I remember you rejecting so many houses, and I think it was just a great decision to use this one.
But at the time, of course, he hated me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think this was the location scout for this house was Jeff, yours, and my first argument. We wanted to come and see the house, being the executive producer. So you set up a location scout for this house. Like I think it was on a Sunday.
On a Sunday, yeah, I remember.
And I was fairly new to Los Angeles, and really, we lived down in Orange County and didn't make many trips up. So I had no idea where I was going or how long it would take to get there. So we were like an hour and a half late, but we came with a whole entourage of people. I might have even had my in-laws with me.
Yeah, I had told the guy it was going to be
a
a little crew. It's a low-budget film. There were more people in that location scout than were
they
on
have
the crew.
if the Warner Brothers had been there. I know. Well, that was always the fear too. We'd always go in and the guy would say, "Oh yeah, we've rented this house out to movies, but you know, it's like $3,000 a day." And we were like,
yeah, and we weren't paying anywhere near that.
We say we couldn't afford $3,000 a week.
Yeah.
You know, but
still it was a big decision for us.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the whole look of a
And we were
film.
lucky the guy took pity on us and gave it to us for the price because, you know, we basically went and said, "Look, this house is great and we love it." But
good old Gary.
Yeah,
Gary,
but there is just no way. There's just no way we can pay it. And we're not telling you it's not worth it because you're right. It's worth what you ask. We just don't have it, but we really want to do it in this house. And we will be extra careful not to damage it. And I think we
didn't do anything.
No, we had very little damage.
I think we were very. I've learned from that. From then on, I try really hard not to do any. You know, I make sure I impress on the crew. Do not mess up these people's home.
Well, they had always been
Burke
pretty
and the
careful
Oranges.
about renting this house out, actually, and I think because of what we ended up doing and also how we arranged the logistics, it's got used a lot more after we went in.
Yeah, we were kind of set a good precedent for them to trust other film crews.
Yeah, and lower budget productions, and you know, I'm sure people who didn't think they might be able to get this house
Yeah.
Got it.
realize that
Well, I've
if
seen
we
it in
got
films all the time since. I see it in films all the time.
a lot of
now.
TV too.
Yeah, a lot of TV. Especially, I saw it in an episode of Tales from the Crypt where it was a haunted house, and
But I really did love the fact that you do look out the windows. You know these are locations.
Yeah, I was just thinking though, if you remember that wall and that door he's slamming on right now, we put those up. That was just a big archway.
Yeah.
Those rooms were really open to each other.
Yeah, in fact, when
And we separated them with
Yeah.
a fake wall and a doorway so that we could have a separate bedroom from the living room.
later when we tear up the room, I remember Gary walked into that scene
And freaked out.
and nearly fainted.
He didn't realize that they were our walls.
Yeah,
that we had put
exactly.
up. And yeah, because the walls are all trash and all, but it's only the ones we put up, not the real walls. I think we should take a moment to mention the inimitable Rosemary
Oh,
here,
absolutely.
who was a joy to work with again, and just a treat. You know, I mean, we sat around. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I was raised on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and I think everyone on the crew would go up to her and quote their favorite Sally line to her. You know, and then Maury Amsterdam came to the set to visit her, and
Yes.
he, of course, was great. Okay, here's the shot I hate the most. He throws it all the way out the window and hits that little trash can. And if you remember, it was written as a dumpster.
Right.
And the prop guy came to me that day and said, we just don't have it in our budget for a dumpster. Can it just be a series of trash cans sitting out there like a lot of apartment buildings do? And I said, yeah, okay. He was such a great guy and he'd done so much for us. I said, yeah, no problem. And I hadn't thought ahead to, well, there's that scene where he throws it out the window. And then we got to do that. And I was like, oh, crap, he's got to hit a trash can from a second-story window. So I said, well, we'll just play it that these guys, you know, they throw axes by each other's nose. So obviously they're pretty accurate. And then I figured if anyone had a complaint, you know, screw them. We already had their money. It was an hour into the movie. What are they going to do?
Speaking of people visiting the set, we had a number of interesting visitors, including O.J. Simpson.
The one and only. That's right, because he was dating Tawny at the time and would come to the set. He got locked in her dressing room one time by accident and was all panicked because he couldn't get out. And we had to get some of the crew guys to come over and like jimmy the lock for him.
I thought he went through the window, actually.
I don't remember that.
I
He
think-
might have.
Yeah, I think he had to go through the window.
I think he was pretty freaked that the National Enquirer was going to show up with a photog and start taking photos of him.
Didn't he bring a little puppy for
He
Tawny
bought
on
it.
her birthday?
He bought a little poodle for Tawny, and she had her red-handed hair, and she handed the puppy the same color, so she would bring it to the set, and it would be a little red-headed puppy. And because he was like trying to be discreet when he would call her on the set, he would always, you know, say Ralph, tell her Ralph's on the phone, and that was OJ's code name.
I took a few calls from Ralph. Those were the days before cell phones. We had one phone for the
Yeah.
whole
That's
whole
right.
crew.
That's right. Well, the funny thing was, he thought he was being, you know, being discreet by calling himself Ralph. He didn't know Tawny was running around saying, "Oh yeah, that's OJ. I'm dating OJ."
Kevin, wasn't this actress in the film that you did at USC?
That's right. She was an actress I'd worked with in one of my student films, and she did a really nice job for me. And again, just a doll to work with. Her name is Judy Tatum, and we had this small part, and we actually she got her SAG card on this.
Wasn't it the Book of Joe that she was in?
Yes, you're right. She was the reporter in Book of Joe.
I remember, and the Book of Joe was actually your student film from USC, which we used to show investors that
See,
he
this
is
guy
a
knows-
director.
He knows what he's doing. This
And-
is a nice moment here. Again, Todd, you know, had to totally sell it. But
And I think they really cared for one another, you know, by this time in
yeah,
the film. I mean, as
as actors,
yeah.
as people. They might have even been dating, though I couldn't swear to that. But you never know.
you better not swear to it.
No, I wouldn't swear to it.
Well, this was the shooting schedule for a
But they
low
were both-
budget was
they were
actually
both-
fairly long.
Yeah, and they were both free and single at the time. So if they were dating, it's okay. They were both free agents at the time.
he's actually wearing a jacket of mine,
Mhm.
which I found in my closet
Really?
about a week or two ago. That's funny.
Does
Big
it still,
Bear.
Does it still smell of his cologne?
Oh, it's
Oh yeah, Big Bear. We actually went up and shot in Big Bear for a week. And I remember now here in LA, for those who live in the West Coast, Big Bear is like a big resort. It's a lake. But we had we had a reaction on some of the East Coast when he says, "That's why I'm going to Big Bear," and it got a big laugh. And we found out later Big Bear was like a Piggly Wiggly, and so it sounds like, Jim, Linda's in trouble. I'm going to the Piggly Wiggly, and we couldn't understand why they were laughing. It's like, what? Big Bear's not that funny sounding a name, you know? And then we were all freaked. Oh God! So every time it plays in one of these Midwest towns that has a Big Bear market, they're gonna just laugh at the line. So you just never know. You know, you write it and it fits for where you are, but you don't know how it's going to play other places.
Well, I think in this day and time, if we did a movie right now, that would have been flagged by clearance, and we
Yeah.
would have called it a different place than what we actually went to.
Yeah, maybe.
To mix up, you know, in case we use somebody else's name or phone number
Right,
that
right.
actually lives in Big Bear.
That's right. They always give you that stuff now. But again, we were so naive. We didn't even know about these services, let alone that this is something that most movies do.
To this day, my wife Marcy gets upset with me because she actually likes Big Bear, and I can't go up there because it represents so much anxiety to me. So it's one resort that we can't go to near LA. Good thing we haven't shot it more around here.
Yeah,
I
really.
wouldn't be able to leave my house.
And this was an interesting night.
Oh yeah.
Just as a matter of fact, we shot our 100th roll of film this night.
Yeah.
And remember, and everyone brought up champagne. They said we broke our 100th roll, and a bunch of the crew people said, when we wrap, we're going to stay here and sit on a grave and play with the Ouija board and drink champagne. Do you want? And I said, you got to be kidding. That's like, you know, asking someone who's working on Jaws if they want to go for a midnight swim in the ocean. It's like, no, I don't think so. You know, I don't believe in this stuff, but I ain't taking any chances, man. You guys knock yourselves out. I'm going home to my nice warm bed and my non-supernatural life.
I remember getting yelled at by, maybe it was a critic. Maybe it was the guy from the Orange County paper when I talked about it. He said, yeah, and isn't that really stupid when the guy jumps over the wall? I mean, who would go into a cemetery? And
well, it couldn't have been him. He didn't
no,
see the movie.
Exactly.
Well, you know what's so funny is we ended up shooting this. The wall was actually way down the ways because it was all metal gate where they were parked. And I just wanted to do it in one shot. I wanted Todd to say, oh, I want to go in and then walk behind the car and go over the gate that you could see in the background of the car shop, but it was a metal gate with spikes. And he said, I'm not climbing over that. What if I slip? And I said, oh, don't be a wuss. Look. And I climbed over and I slipped, and the spike went right through my pants and just like missed my family jewels. And I said, okay, we'll go over the wall. I was like hanging on this thing and like this close to impaling myself, you know, and I thought, okay, there you go. Todd was right. The only time, I might add, on the whole film that he was right and I was wrong.
Many women asked me if that was a phallic symbol and you put that there on purpose.
Oh, the
gravestone?
That gravestone. I don't even remember. I know we brought some and others were actually there. I can't remember which ones are ours and which ones were real. So I couldn't tell you, to tell you the truth. I don't even know if that's ours or if that was already there. Because they had some great headstones that were actually at this cemetery. This was like in Pomona or
Glendale?
Glendale.
Yeah,
right,
Glendale. And we cut a break having the wind be so calm that night.
Yeah, because otherwise that fog would have just blown away.
Yeah, and it's the same cemetery where we shot the other scenes.
Right, the daytime scenes.
Yeah, the daytime scenes.
Jim's funeral.
And we had a massive, one of the ways that I think the lighting is so good is that instead of just using a condor for the HMI light, we got it on a Chapman crane, so it's really, really up there.
So it really feels like
less
moonlight.
directional. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It really feels like natural moonlight.
I thought this was such a smart thing that you did in this scene by following him rather than Jim.
Yeah.
Stephen, because he's such a tense guy. And
well, you know, my thinking was not just that, but if you follow Jim, you know he's the lead and you're only, you know, an hour and 8 minutes in, he's not going to die yet. Mm-hmm. But the secondary character could very well be killed here.
Right.
So I figured if you follow the secondary character, the audience is really going to be scared because they think this could be it. This could be where he buys the farm because he is the secondary lead. Whereas Todd, they would have known, okay, we might get a scare, but nothing's going to happen to him.
I like how both the guys, especially Steven in this scene, really are vulnerable.
Oh yeah, Steve throws
Yeah.
himself. He doesn't worry if he's going to look foolish. The guy is supposed to be scared. He goes for it. He looks scared and doesn't care if he looks stupid looking scared. He's like, this guy's ready to crap his pants, so I'm going to play him that way, and just great. And again, a perfect foil for Todd, who's more of a lackadaisical, layback laugh. And then Todd even laughs at him. Todd, I know, came to me and said, "My God, he's like so going." When he gets scared that I almost want to laugh. And I said, then do it, because that's the whole point. Your character would laugh at his character for getting scared, you know? So, and then it just plays so natural, like these guys are really believable. And this, of course, you know, I think this is just a nice scene to have in this kind of movie, where normally they wouldn't have a scene like this in a horror film. And it just really cements these two characters. And finally, you know that Steve's character isn't a jerk. He's a nice guy. He's dealing with a lot. He's dealing with the girl he loves, being with his best friend, and feeling that he's been betrayed by both, and trying to maintain a cool atmosphere, like I don't care, when in reality, of course, he cares. He cares very much, and it just eats away at him.
Yeah, it is a great scene.
And, you know, and these guys just play it so perfectly.
Well, there were a number of and when I say criticisms, I've sometimes you hear those more than anything. Obviously,
Well, yeah.
the film was hugely successful, and many critics loved it, and more.
But it's always the bad ones you remember.
But I find it interesting that, like the comment about going over the wall, oh, they would never do that. Well, that's what makes it an interesting film, that, you know, a character would decide to do that.
Yeah.
And it's within his character. And, you know, this scene here, too, people might, you know, I've heard, well, it could slow the film down. But, I mean, I love that both you and Jeff were really brave to keep these scenes in the film and not succumb to, well, you got to pick up the pace. And
Right. Yeah, because we were getting a lot of pressure about losing this scene.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think it really makes the film work even better.
I think that's one of the benefits, again, of the fact that the film's editing came out of showing it to real people instead of distributors, you know, in terms of the people that were around us.
And seeing that the emotions were working for your general audience. So we knew, I think that gave us the confidence to stand up and say to the distributor, no, we want to keep the scene, because we'd seen it play with audiences and we knew the scene worked. Whether they, you know, theoretically maybe it shouldn't work, but it did. We knew it did because we'd seen it with an audience.
That helps so much. Those audience screenings, I mean, how many did we have? With
a lot.
Just people that weren't even in the business.
No, just screen them for people left and right, and in various stages. I remember sitting at the mixing board where all we had was the music track and the production sound, and then I just had Dennis do extra stings for the scares since we didn't have any sound effects, and then I would just crank it up when I knew a sting was coming to make the audience jump, and you know.
And of course, those are the days before Avid and Pro Tools, so
everything.
This was cut work print. Although Dan,
which was looking dirty and beat up by then, and.
But at least we had a print.
Yeah.
We could go show it. Unlike
exactly.
If you're making an independent film these days, you don't often have anything other than the Avid cut to show.
Which is a little bad quality VHS that, you know, doesn't really impress. There's a lot to be said for seeing something on a big screen.
Yes,
it really does help. So this was a really good scare too.
This is one of my favorite scares in any film that we've ever been involved in, and maybe any film. I mean, I think of the scene in The Omen with the head bouncing off the glass after it's been severed when it slides off the truck. And I mean, this is a really, really scary scene. You're in the basement of a hospital, and
and it's just creepy and it's quiet. Yeah, exactly. It's just these long, dark hallways.
Kevin, you should. I think I had brought in Phil Loopson, who played Malfreda, to be
who was not
a
an
second
actor.
AD.
Right, he was not an actor, but he just had a great look. And we said, wow. Yeah, because you brought him in for something else. He was a still photographer or something.
Yeah, and he actually wanted to be an assistant director on the film. And then did you just see him and decide?
I think so. I just saw him and thought, oh my God, this guy would be perfect for Malfreda, because he's big and he's so big and intimidating. He's a big, intimidating guy, but, you know, we don't have to make him up look creepy or freaky, because I always hate that when, if you're ugly, you're evil. If you're pretty, you're not, you know. And here was a guy who wasn't strange or weird looking. He was very intimidating. And I think what we did do was our makeup guy, whose name is totally escaping me, but another guy I knew from film school, John Dutro.
John Dutro.
John
Yeah.
Dutro. He made just a prosthetic forehead for him so that he was always frowning.
Exactly.
So that his brow was always knitted down.
It was perfect.
It was
prosthetic,
perfect. So
yeah.
he just kind of, and then I think maybe he gave him some teeth that were a little longer, so they kind of have a fangy look. So that you just, and other than that, it was just Phil, and it was, you know, and Phil like towers over me, and I'm like 6'3". So I mean, just, you know, Phil just had a great, imposing presence. And this scene, I just remember the art department had said, because we had the scene where this is where the kid died on the boat. And what we did was we shot this scene in the place, this dock was really all beat up like this. And then to shoot it 30 years earlier, they totally repainted and built the place up. The guy who owned the dock, he made out like a bandit because he got this place all fixed up for him so that we could have it looking brand new for the boat explosion scene. And then none of that got used. But they did a marvelous job because the dock all cleaned up, looked gorgeous. And we had some old car from the 50s and that the father and son drive up in.
This scene is one of the few scenes that are shot on a stage. The actual hands on the board.
Right.
In this scene, and both the daytime exteriors and the interiors were
right.
all done on a stage.
Almost all the
late
hands,
post-production.
Almost all the hands on the boards were shot on a stage afterwards as pickup shots. We cut the film without having the close-ups of the boards yet, and then decided where I wanted the board close-up and when I wanted to go in really close, and all based on how the rest of the cut was working.
Didn't we shoot the scene with Linda's beheading, the last scene that we just saw with wasn't that shot in the parking lot of the Red Fox building?
What, the
actual
no, that's the axe to the head.
Oh, no, that's his axe to
Stephen.
the head in this. Yeah, that was actually not the parking lot. I think it was up on the roof because we couldn't see it. We had to have nothing but blue sky in the background. So we went up to the roof of the Red Fox building where Jeff's production offices were, yeah. And we shot the close-up for the axe actually hitting his forehead was up on the roof of the Red Fox building.
I saw that prosthetic head somewhere recently.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, with the big axe.
Big axe in the hole on the old noggin, yeah. Remember the axe was on this device so that it would always hit the same spot.
Yeah,
it was...
so that we could set the camera close on that forehead and the axe would hit exactly where it had to hit. No, no swinging it with a hand and having the guy miss, go off frame or something. It's just funny, the stuff you have to think of and do to get something that looks like a very simple shot. It's like, it's not that simple though. When you're in that close on something, you have to hit exactly where you need to hit.
Remember, those were the days before digital.
Oh yeah, there was no such thing.
CGI.
Oh yeah, all they had was blue screen, and it always looked bad because they'd always had matte lines around the characters. So you never wanted to use blue screen back then. So yeah, all of these effects are practical. We have one optical at the end.
And that was Taslow and Lewis.
Yep, and they did a great job. They sure did.
And a company called Motion Opticals, actually a guy named Jim Stewart, I believe, who Taz, I think, introduced us to.
That's very possible. And again, Taslow was someone we knew from film school. He had done special effects on Book of Joe. He blew up the car in the student film Book of Joe.
He also did a very famous USC, I don't know if it's a student film, but where he blows up the old... They did a miniature of the old building
complex,
and blows it up. It was really impressive.
Yeah.
Kevin, didn't you write this script wasn't this like a student project at...
Actually, one of the classes I took at SC was a screenwriting class, and you had to write a feature screenplay, and this was the screenplay I wrote in class. So this was my very first feature screenplay, and I wrote it as a class assignment in USC.
Did you get a lot of feedback from students in the class about the script, or was it something you wrote and you were working on and you didn't get a lot of feedback?
I got some feedback, not a lot, but the girls in the class hated it because, they were all, everyone in film school imagines themselves as the next Roman Polanski or something, so that I was writing something that was a horror film about a Ouija board and had people getting beheaded and axes to the forehead. They weren't too crazy about it. But a couple of people did see that, well, yeah, but the characters are really strong and this is really, and I had several people, Melissa Gelano, who at the time, Melissa Martin, she's a producer now, a TV producer, but I remember she read the script and said, it scared the hell out of me. She goes, I think this is a really scary script. And that's the kind of stuff that's nice to hear,
Well, I think, Walt, you saw immediately the hook. I think you really liked the script, and I think, recognized how other people would really see that hook and get interested in it.
Yeah, we felt, I mean, right off from the first read, I mean, having played with a Ouija board as kids, I mean, it was a game that we got in the Midwest growing up for Christmas somewhere in the mid-'60s. Parker Brothers game, it was, I think, even advertised at that time.
That's why, I wrote it, because I actually lived in a Victorian apartment before I moved to LA to go to USC. A Victorian house that had been turned into apartments, kind of like in this script. And a friend brought a Ouija board to the party, and we played with it, and it was very creepy. And while I was sitting there, I thought, man, I'd go see a film called Ouija, knowing nothing else about it, just Ouija. And as a matter of fact, that's what the script was called. And the whole time we shot the film, it was called Ouija.
Yeah, that was the quid pro quo with the insurance company,
Right.
that we wouldn't use Ouija in the title.
But when we changed the title to Witchboard, it took a long time for me to get used to calling it Witchboard. I mean, it was because we'd been calling it Ouija for 3 years,
And you came up with the name Witchboard too, didn't you?
Well, because
Kevin?
in the script, in the party scene, he actually says that the Ouija board used to be called a Witchboard, but we cut it because we thought this party scene's too long, and that's interesting little piece of information, but it's not germane to the story, so we lose it. Then we ended up, after the film was cut, mixed, and done, changing it to Witchboard, and I thought, oh geez, it would have been nice if we'd kept that line where he says they used to be called Witchboards. What we did instead was, in Witchboard 2, I have the guy tell her that they used to be called Witchboards. Got it in on part 2, but in part 1 it had actually been dialogue at the party that we shot and cut out, and then changed the title to Witchboard. And I thought, that sucks. We had a line where he actually says they used to be called Witchboards, and we don't have it in the film.
I think this is one of the most effective scenes. The use of the 9.8 millimeter lens.
Yeah.
The crane at the end with the hot head, which I remember gave Bill Wright fits trying to get all that equipment out here on the budget that we have.
Bill was our production coordinator.
He was our production manager.
Because Leslie Lair, I think, was our production manager, or was she the production coordinator?
I think she was the coordinator, and Bill was the production manager.
Leslie, who's now a novelist,
and who was also the production accountant on the film.
Yeah,
and then the music too, which is a mixture of Lee's sound design with Dana DeSelle's sound design and
music,
and then an obscure
piece of French music called Bohor something
by Iana Xenakis. I think he's Greek, actually.
Oh, is he?
One of the first music concrete guys.
But yeah, so it was like just a hodgepodge of stuff to get that spirit POV sound.
Isn't that really Stephen Nichols too, in that water?
Yep.
I mean,
and it was freezing.
It was
Steven's got to act dead, and it's like all he wants. He's so cold there that just before we do the take, his teeth are chattering. He has to stop chattering and just lay there like he's dead, and he's frozen. He's just dying. It was so miserable for him.
And on any other budget, of course, that shot from behind would have been
somebody else, a stunt guy, some mealy nobody.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. Instead, we stick the actual actor out there. But yeah, these guys were troopers, though. I mean, there wasn't anything we asked them to do that they wouldn't do.
This is a shot. It was kind of difficult end of the day.
Oh yeah, it was.
And then going from the close up that high,
it was just tough. It was just a tough shot. But these are the kind of shots that people remember, and that really help sell the whole spirit point of view stuff.
Who was responsible for the childlike voice in the background that kind of
Dana DeSelle, who was
that was great.
Yeah, what she did was she took while we had the gal who played Zarabeth, Kathleen, came in for her ADR. While we had her, she just had her do things like that. Dana did, and then Dana just took those tracks, and what she'd do is she'd lay 3 of them on top of each other, slightly off, so that it created like an echo effect, and just laid them in every now and then on the spirit POVs, and it just it gives you the willies. Just makes the hairs go up on the back of your neck. This was a nice shot. Again, something that was just...
Didn't Richard do this?
Yeah, and the crane was breaking down. As a matter of fact, that's when I was pretty sure we were going to replace Richard. We were having all problems with the crane not working, and he came over to bitch that American cinematographer wasn't there to get a picture of him with the crane. I'm like, I'm worried about whether we're going to make this shot before the 10 o'clock curfew when we have to shut down. And you're worried that you're not going to get your shot in American cinematographer. I think I told Jeff, that's it.
I think one of the problems with that shot too, that was so difficult, is the crane had to be on the grass of this, natural location. So getting the crane on there, getting it flat, and then, getting it up there was really difficult. And I don't think he had ever done anything. I know.
No, none of us had.
Yeah.
But I guess my problem was, though, that his priorities seemed really out of whack. He was, and he'd said things before to me like, this is just a stepping stone to better films, It's like,
Well, that's a true statement in
it's
a way.
true,
I mean,
but still, you gotta tackle it. This is the film you're doing right now. You got to do this one to the best of your abilities, not kind of just say, well, I'm just doing this so that it'll bring me better opportunities. That's a plus if it happens. But right now you're doing this film and let's do it.
Well, I think that's the key. With everything in life, if you focus on something, it gets better. And
yeah, and it's like, and Roy Wagner, who had already done 80 films, and a lot of them low budget, crapola things that I know he wasn't crazy about. And, and let's face it, when he's shooting this, he probably thought this was just going to be another low budget crap film he was doing. But he still came on and shot that thing like he was doing Gone with the Wind. He did not slough off. He worked his ass off, and he tackled it like he would a $20 million, $30 million, $40 million film. And he just gave it his all. He brought all his expertise and his experience and his enthusiasm to this little itty bitty budget with a no-name cast and a no-name director. And
one thing that helped too was having, they were called the Grips from Hell.
yeah,
Pat Daly, Tommy West,
those
Charlie
guys
Norcross
were phenomenal.
Yeah, and they created all these devices that allowed us to, mount the camera in places.
Well, because it's one thing for me to come up with some creative shot, but then I hand it over to these guys. They're the ones who have to actually build the device that can give me the shot I want. Speaking of special effects, Tawny is a special effect all by herself. And again, just I knew, for these kind of films, you have to have nudity. It's part of the, when you only got $1 million budget and you're not selling big, incredible matte shots, then a pretty naked girl is a good selling point. But I wanted to have it be more than just a reason for her to be naked. And I thought, if we do this with the shower attacking her, we get our obligatory nude scene, but it's actually, again, serves the story as well.
Well, and also you're just feeling for her going naked through this, whether she's a male or female, going through that glass.
Yeah.
So you're cringing at the same time.
Well, also, being naked is just a very intimidating thing. You're very exposed. You're very susceptible. You're very almost victim-like just from the fact that you are naked. So being attacked at a point when you're already that vulnerable, I think just makes the attack all that more terrifying, because you are naked and already very vulnerable before the attack even took place.
Yeah, and then capping it off there with
speaking of
nice
bad
coating
matte
to the scene.
shots.
Yeah.
That's our one day for night shot where we had to put in the black sky and
the starry night.
and it
for like $500 or $200,
and looks like every penny we spent on it. But hey, considering that's not too bad to have one kind of cheesy shot in a whole movie, especially a movie that again was this small a budget. And that's a creepy shot where we just rack focused on him at the end of that shot of the POV, and it really sells that he's kind of he's possessed her now.
And that night for day shot is part of Kevin's oeuvre.
The lock off, yeah.
This is the scene where Gary the owner of the house walked in
and didn't realize those walls were
faded.
fake walls that we had put up on top of his real walls, and thought, what did you do? And it's like, don't worry, those are our walls. They're just sheetrock up in front of your walls, so we could trash them. I remember, though, that when we finished the film, I had been so concerned about not making a cheesy horror film that I was worried then that we didn't have enough scares, that I'd concentrated on character development. And we saw it with the distributor who came in, and I mentioned my concern to him. And I was sitting next to him, and when she jumps up with the axe there, he grabbed my arm and almost landed in my lap. And afterwards, I said, because I had told him coming in, I said, look, if the film's got 5 good jumps, I'll be happy. And he said, you got a lot more than 5. And it was like, that's good to know, because again, we had concentrated so much on the character development and the story that I'd been afraid after we were done that maybe I hadn't made the film scary enough.
Yeah, that's always a problem. I mean, it's the same with comedies. You're making the movie and you're following the script, and you have this thing every day of, well, we got our pages, but is it funny? And it's the same, you know,
with this, we got the pages and we got some good performances, but at the end of the day, is it scary?
Well, especially this kind of scary, you were not relying on special effects
or blood and gore a lot.
You know,
I mean,
and not a lot of comedy too. Once you got out of the Jim Quinn and Zara Beth, once they die, I mean, it's a very serious film. And
that's what I wanted to slowly just get as we got further along. The story just got darker and darker and darker, so that we kind of just present you with more and more scary stuff. Tawny did a really nice job here too. So did Todd. Todd had a hard part here. He had a hard sell.
Was there a lot of tension shooting this scene? I seem to recall, or am I thinking of another scene?
Well, it was tough.
I mean, just trying to not that there was tension between anyone.
No, there was, because we'd put a whole grid up on the ceiling and lit the whole room so that they could go anywhere. Because I didn't want to have them worrying about staging. That they could. I wanted it to be really raw. And then Roy shot this whole scene handheld, and that's back with those big old heavy Aries or Panavisions, whatever we were shooting with, but they were huge cameras, and he had that thing on his shoulder for the whole, half a day we shot this scene, and you could tell by the end of the day his back was shot. But I think it really added to have that, that handheld motion where the camera can whip back and forth quickly, and even when it's standing still, there's still just enough motion in it that you feel tense.
Yeah, especially since it hadn't been used really. Except in that Zara Beth scene.
Right. Well, even that wasn't handheld. It was still on a dolly. It was just not on track. But this is completely handheld. The only other time we did handheld shots at all were spirit point of view shots. So this was the only sequence that was done like completely handheld, just to give it that little extra tension.
And I guess we're coming up to one of the bigger cheats in the film where he gets blown out of this window, but then we actually did the shot of him coming out the window at a park.
Right. That was the very last shot in the film that we shot. It was the last day of shooting, was him going out the window.
I remember planning that shot. We got there in the morning, and Roy had taught me how to do a grid of, laying out all of your different departments and how much each was going to take, and, being able to really calculate how long it was going to take you to arrive at, the, shooting scene. And I remember doing that as we arrived that morning, getting everyone's information and realizing we didn't have enough hours in the day to do this one shot.
We were there at sunup, but everyone was saying, well, we won't be ready till sundown. And we literally got that shot just as the sun was about to start setting. We screamed through it, get up there to get it.
In fact, after it's set, I think.
Yeah, I think we just opened up the lens full on and caught what remaining little sunlight there was.
I think another interesting thing about the scene is it's the first, coming up is the only real optical we have with the witchboard spinning towards us. And to do that shot, Taslow had created this little litho of the Ouija board. And so I remember looking at it over the weeks, and when we had a screening, I decided, well, let's make tickets out of this. And I remember sending the tickets down to Walter, and they were so excited because, it looked like this mini Ouija board. And that's what started, this whole process of, let's, make
the whole
a gazillion
promo
of these.
campaign. The whole promo campaign ended up being...
One of the people who worked with us at the time
was
a guitar player.
Yeah.
And he had a guitar pick.
Oh, right.
And I picked that thing up and went, oh, man, this is the planchette to this little Ouija board here. And it became the whole campaign.
Yep. So just little moments of luck and brilliance mixed together.
So obviously this shot was intended to be in very bright daylight.
Yeah.
It's shot after the sun was setting.
Yep. And there's my Fiero, the first new car I ever owned that I was able to buy because of this film and Everything I'd owned had been like 10 years old, and that was a brand new 85 Fiero.
This is a really nice moment to see. One of our investors in the film saw came on the set and read the script, and there's Leslie Lair's dad.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And she, the investor, Donna Reynolds, a good friend, said that her daughter designed wedding gowns.
Oh, that's right.
And did wedding planning. So she and her daughter did all of the bows
the
and
bridesmaids,
things. Yeah,
the bridesmaids and the wedding dress. And,
exactly.
Yeah.
And then went on to do the wardrobe for Night of the Demons.
Did all the kids' costumes.
Exactly.
And, we should mention, too, the girl who did costumes on this did a really nice job because, in a budget like this, you just find clothes that fit the characters. But for Tawny, she made almost all of Tawny's clothes from scratch and on no budget whatsoever. And she did a really nice job, giving Tawny a really nice, interesting look that really did set her character apart. This is, and she did it all from scratch and did a really nice job. And our final big bogus. Cheese, extra cheese on your pizza here, guys.
A lot of people who hate that. I loved it.
Yeah, you got a big pepperoni right in the middle of all that cheese. It's ahead warp factor cheese. And let's see, Robin Jones, who just did and Chris Medic and Terry Edwards. Terry was a great guy too. Leslie, Becca, who pretty much at one point or another did every position, something on every
casting,
level.
locations.
Yeah, she was great. Bill Wright, who again we knew from USC, and there's the Grips from Hell. Those guys, Tommy and Shane, were just great. They really helped us, man, because we were all pretty much first timers, and the effects. John Cork, another great guy who wrote a terrific film, a Sissy Spacek Whoopi Goldberg film. It was a terrific film that he wrote. Bob Lucas, the prop guy, just did a great job. Meryl Green was the costumer. She did a really nice job. Sharon McGonigal worked with her and also did a really nice job. Well, again, thank you very much for sitting through the whole film. Obviously, a second time, because if you listen to this whole track, then this is your second time sitting through the movie. We appreciate it. And Jeff and Walter, again, it was great to sit here and watch it with you guys again and relive a lot of it and remember things that I haven't thought about in 10 years.
Yeah, it was really a pleasure to sit here and talk about it and think about it. And I also, would say too, is even though I got the producing credit on this, it would have been more, I think, accurate for Walter and I to have gotten that credit together. And I also think Becca Boss's role, in many ways, she was, producing it right there with me the whole time. And I just thank all the people who were there for me during that film, both above and below the line, who really taught me a lot about the film business and a lot about life and friendship.
Yeah, it really was a great experience. And Jeff said at one point during the making of this film that if we're all still friends at the end of this, we'll probably have a very successful movie. And here we are today, nearly 30 years later, all friends watching the film again. And
it's not 30 years later. Let's not age us too much.
Isn't it?
85.
Well, I mean, we're close.
Half full to my right, half empty to my left.
Shoot me now.
But it's great to watch this and with you guys and see it, because it still looks great. So to those watching, thanks a lot for continuing to do so, because you helped us get it to this point.
That's right. And again, 30 years ago, man, I forgot I directed this when I was 12. Good night, folks.